Hello and welcome to the 100 Day Art Challenge. If this is the first time you're watching a video on my channel, then this is one of the many videos that I do for this challenge, and I'm up to, I don't know, somewhere in the mid-30s at the moment, I believe. And this is the second of 3 soft pastel pieces that I've been making for this week, today being Thursday the 26th of September. The last drawing that I did, so yesterday's upload, was of a dilapidated old farmhouse, almost looked like a tiny cottage. It was very aesthetically pleasing for me, and I liked pushing my way through this page to because it was a similar page to this. As you can see on the paper, there's a lot of texture and a lot of messy, splashy looking stuff which is actually dried, but I enjoyed pushing my way through to render that image. For this one, it's I'd already done the work to get the page looking as it is, so if you want to see what yesterday's upload looked like, I will put a link in the top right hand corner now. And otherwise, for this video, this is an image which is actually my desktop image on my computer here, and it's from a walk that Petra and I would do when we were visiting farms to develop our ideas for this collaborative project about farming and agriculture. And on the walk back, it would be early evening and the sky would start to become very colourful, and I took a photograph across the farmland looking out towards the sun, which was quite low, and the clouds were all purple and orange and just beautiful, really very colourful sky. And this telegraph pole was in the foreground. So I thought it's quite a prominent compositional device, but I need to get these lines right, these cables coming from the different, I don't know what you'd call them, different points at the top of the telegraph pole, and I was trying to get the perspective right. And as they approached the telegraph pole from where we were looking, the angle did change, that they were receding into the distance, so it may not look as though the lines follow straight, but I can assure you from the reference they don't follow straight, so that's why the angle is different on those lines, going from the center at the top to the lower right hand side of the upper side of the right hand side of the page. That's why that's not a perfect perspective. That's what the photo reference does. For this, as I said, I'm using soft pastels. This is a grayscale set which I bought for cheap at a stationery shop in Wales, and they're mostly light to mid-tone greys. And then you have a couple of dark greys at the end, a couple of blacks at the very high end, and as you can see, a couple of white soft pastel sticks at the low end. Very enjoyable medium to use for me, and very different from my recent uploads of oil pastels, which if you haven't seen, that's a series which well, it was part of the 100 Day Art Challenge series, but it was also a series within that of portraits and one still life, from what I remember, in oil pastels. So now we're into the soft pastel section, and it's not nearly as long, but I am going to mix things up a little bit. I still have certain submissions to do, but for now it's just I'm going to try to group things together as much as possible from the videos that I have banked and ready to upload. I've made lots and lots of videos and haven't yet uploaded them in order, so I'm way ahead of where we are in the challenge. But that's nice for me because I can look ahead and see what I think would be interesting. For example, in the oil pastel series of portraiture that I was uploading, it became so frequent that I thought I would break it up by including a plein air watercolour painting session that I had more recently. So I interrupted the oil pastel portraiture with a bit of a breather, just a palette cleanser if you will, because it does become a bit repetitive, and as much as I enjoy it, I just thought for the sake of the viewers I'd like to create a little bit of diversity. There were just so many of them in a row, and yeah, that's what I decided to do there. Whereas for soft pastels, as I said, I only have 3, but I am soon going to make signs as well for this series because they're going up for sale in Trefnan Inn, so that will be part of this set, and part of the story that goes together with this is I'm going to show you the soft pastel pieces that I'm making, just like this one, them being framed and the signs being painted and the work being put up on the wall and the exhibition as it sits there. It's a lovely little restaurant and pub, and it was Petra and I had our last exhibition there. It was interesting because Petra's work is more contemporary and unorthodox, and mine's a bit more classical, but just like you can see in this work, I was trying to push my work into something which could be described as a bit more abstract in a way. That's why I consider these to be a semi-abstract landscapes. They're not exactly a classical approach to landscapes. There is still some unorthodox practices going in to the development of this piece. Just from the ground that I made out of the black soft pastel, which I scrubbed on the surface and then dipped my fingers in a jar of water and pushed them around, and that's what made this grey background. It's just random patterns that I was making with my fingers and trying to then flick drops of water on the surface, just because I wanted something to create an interest in some kind of turbulent environment before I started, and then I can push through that in order to make something more figurative or representational. I think part of art making for a lot of people is making a mess and then tidying it up. So I start with chaos and then I try to find order through this type of practice that I'm doing here, where I'm using the white to create a bit of lighter space and establish certain planes of the land to try and describe what we're looking at, because aside from the telegraph pole, everything is still really obliterated by the tonality of the surface, and I don't mind that either, but I think if I were to put that in a frame, it wouldn't quite communicate what it could potentially do were I to put more work in, and that's what I'm showing you here. I don't often put real-time videos into my onto my channel, especially not for this challenge, because it can be an hour long, but I thought because this is under 30 minutes it would be worth sharing the real-time footage of me creating this piece. I always find it interesting to watch artists, the speed that they work and the decisions they make, which you can see from where the hand hovers sometimes. That's what they're thinking about. They're thinking, should I go here, should I put that back and use a darker or mid-tone instead of the light? And I did think about that briefly for a moment, and then I thought, you know, I've created these dark patches that are supposed to be hedges, but if I use the white now, I can really describe those better by drawing the sky through the gaps in the hedges and creating this larger area of negative space around the subjects in the foreground and the midground. I like this set so far. I'm yet to create the third piece. That will be today, I think, that I will make the third piece ready to upload on the 27th, which as I said, it's currently the 26th. Normally this video series I'm way ahead and I do have a lot of videos banked, but for this, you know, mini series within the challenge, you know, the video series, I would like all 3 soft pastel pieces to be together, so that's why I need to make one more soon so that it can be joined with these in that order. Just like the signs that I need to draw and paint ready to advertise the work being for sale in the premises, that needs to be just needs to be made, which shouldn't take too long. It's a lot of the time the barrier between the work being done is just starting, and that can take a lot of effort just to make that start, because I know that as soon as I do engage with the subject and devote some time to it, it can be hours and hours and a lot of fighting to make it through to something which is working. But I'm often enjoying that session and also happy to look at it afterwards. Just like these pieces, I put it off for so long making these soft pastel landscapes in portrait formats, but they're still landscapes. I put them off because I thought they'd be so much harder. So the first stage, where I created all this mess on the surface before I started drawing the landscape as you see it now, that was done long before I started doing this work on top of it. I had those sat on the side for a good long while, and I just didn't want to do it. I think because of my reluctance to make a mistake, or to not exactly know what would be the best reference image that I have, my own photographs that I was looking through. I have so many photographs of farmland that I couldn't decide what would be the best to use. And then when I did decide, I was quite relieved to pick the dilapidated cottage for yesterday's upload, and then this, which is only a segment of my desktop image. It's on the left hand side. The other part of it is all the sky that I described, which you can't see in this, it just goes white, but there are lots of billowing clouds on the right hand side of the image, and that's cut off for this format that I've done here, because as I said, it's in portrait format. And that's what made me hesitate. It's what made me reluctant to engage with these pieces. Similarly, I could have made my third soft pastel piece yesterday for this series. I had decided yesterday that's what I was going to do, but I need to force myself to start the work. I don't know why there's a level of anxiety around that, but that's what I experience until I start the work, and then my confidence grows as I make mistakes and try to tidy them up or find a way out of the mistakes that I've made. I quite enjoy these cables being drawn with the negative space, just as I'm trying to carefully pick my way through this part of the landscape. It may look as though I'm just haphazardly scrubbing all of it, but I really am trying to preserve certain parts and cover others with a semi-opaque layer. I don't want it to be completely white because that wouldn't be interesting, but I also do want to flatten out that section of the piece so that it looks like the sky and it defines what's happening on the ground. So that's what my thought process is, and you can see it coming together now. With the sky going in, the ground really starts to take shape and settle in, and that's where I'm up to with my rendering. And I don't really mind having this much white space on the surface, because it does have that effect on everything else. It makes all of the textures stand out so much more boldly and have that impression of nature that we were walking along. I mean, all of that just looked like black scribbles before, but now that I've carved out the sky, I don't know if it's just me, but I can really see the tree taking shape and some of the ground and hedges there starting to look more natural, like the landscape that you would find whilst walking towards farmland. And that's part of the magic of covering the picture plane. It's the same with painting. When you have a white surface, it's very difficult to see how the colours are reacting with each other. As soon as you get rid of all of the white on the surface of the page or the canvas that you're using, then you can see how the colours balance with each other, and they are tonally darker than white is. White on the surface is an unreasonably light colour on a painting. A lot of the time you don't really need white in a painting unless you want it to be the brightest highlight. This is not to say that you shouldn't do it, I'm just saying that you don't need it necessarily. You can tonally shift everything quite a bit darker and it will still read as quite a bright light among dark midtones and shadows. So that's what I think is a very powerful part of art making, is how things change in your perception when they all adjust to each other. And a more simple example is what I'm creating here, because the white space is now dominating that area. It just becomes much easier. Now the soft pastel, as I use it, does chip away when I'm pressing it hard on the surface, and that's what I got there, is a little chip off the corner. So I've put it on the surface because I am going to tip that into the bin in a moment, which won't hurt. It does make me more conscious of the fact that the pressure that I apply to the surface doesn't have to be so strong, but I would like to cover it. So you can see there when I'm scrubbing it on, it doesn't cover it completely white, and I would like it to be a bit more flush than what it is there. I just want it to be not exactly opaque, but I want it to have a decent coverage so that it looks like the sky, without any suggestion that I'm doing very faint clouds. I want it to just be a bit of texture in the sky, just a bit more interesting than having it completely flat, as I said earlier. But I think that already it's transformed the piece. Now I'm going to tip away that little chip off the top there, and then come back to develop the foreground and midground areas, because you can already see what I'm getting at with this piece. But if you can push a little bit further into the definition of some of these shapes, then it really does create this environment. And I love soft pastels for this. They're a lot more dusty than oil pastels, which only have flakes and crumbs. But with soft pastels, as you can see, you can rub them in with your finger and have a completely different effect. Because I'm trying to differentiate between the background and the midground, smudging in tone into the back there, that's the hillside behind the tree, it gives it a softer look. It's more cloudy and faint, and it does suggest distance, which I appreciate, because if I'm going to have a drier application in the foreground, that will give it this sense of proximity to the camera. I say to the camera, to the viewer. And just using the grey there to shape some of that smudgy area, and it doesn't hurt. It needs to be, quite faint still, because I don't want it too broad on the background, but it's not far enough in the distance that it would be tonally equivalent with the sky. So I'm being guided by the reference, but I'm also not trying to make it an exact replica of what I'm seeing. And just smudging it in just blends it, smooths it out, and softens a lot of what's happening there, and just makes it quite different. Now, if I did that to what I have developed here on the hedges or on the tree, I think it would really ruin the effect that I was trying to achieve with the texture of the foliage that you're getting here. But then touching certain parts on the hillside there, just to give it a sense of the things that you see on a hillside will be parts of fields, and you'll see very subtle details. So I don't want it to be necessarily a flat layer. It's all just, to me, it's all not equally important, but it's all important to ensure that the viewer is given enough information to appreciate on the surface, that their eyes can drift around where there is detail and marks that have been made, and see suggestions of trees or cattle or farms and fields. And I think that it only has to be very slight tonal difference. And again, I'm trying to soften the bits around the tree there just to suggest what's happening, and that will be sufficient for what I'm trying to do. But we still have a bit of information missing in the foreground, because what you're looking at is the hedges there. That's the top of the hedges I'm working on there. The darker part is where it's the side of the hedges, And then there's this patch of grass, but I'm not walking on grass, I'm walking on a concrete path. So what I need to do is consider how I'm going to just create a distinction between the grass that's next to the hedges and the concrete path that I'm walking along. And it's only going to have to take a little bit of a subtle suggestion here or there to show that there is an edge to where the grass is and a start to the concrete path. But that to me would be an important detail to make, so that you are defining the surface area that we're walking along, because everything that I'm doing here is just slight touches of things that I can just see will need a little bit more of blending to make it look like a reasonable hedge with some detail there. So there we go, you can see just a touch there shows the edge of the grass, and it may be only slight and smudged in, but if you give something an edge, it shows that the light is hitting the top and the shadow is collecting lower down. So it's the slightest thing, but I think it makes a huge difference, and details like that for me are what makes a certain image grounded in its own reality. And I think it's quite a pleasant landscape piece. I still consider that semi-abstract because it's quite loose, it's not fully described, it's not overly rendered, but I'm trying to put in fast marks that are expressive and suggestive and just not too heavy-handed, that are describing light. It's not a block of hedges, it's just an edge. And there you have it, that is the landscape. So what I need to do now is cut this down to size, just as I've done with the first one, and get it into this frame here. So 2 matching frames. That was the piece that I uploaded yesterday on the left, and that was a dilapidated old farmhouse that John Williams and I saw when we were walking to Paris Mountain from the spot where we parked in the country lanes when we arrived. Lovely destination, I do recommend it. And this is my little tip to lifting up the tabs on the back of a frame, which can be quite tricky, is a palette knife. That's what I use to get it up. And again, it's tricky to get up the cardboard, so why not just pry it open with a palette knife again. It's still it's thin enough to slide in between the gap, and it doesn't do any damage to it. Now what I'm doing here is ensuring that the backing board is measured up against the paper. I'm going to mark it, score a line along the side, and then cut it down to size so that it fits snug inside of the frame. And these 2 pieces are ready to go into the exhibition at Trevenant Inn. I'm looking forward to showing you the third. That will be tomorrow's upload. And I did have a photo reference ready, but then every time I restart my computer I lose the reference, so I'm going to have to go and find that again because I can't remember what it was. But hopefully if I look in the similar folder that I looked at last time, I should hopefully come across something which I recognise as the piece that I want to do. In fact, I've just remembered what it was, and yeah, I am keen to do it. It's a picture that I took when I was walking with Petra again, and we both admired this idea of an image, so I'm looking forward to doing that at long last. It was supposed to be part of the exhibition from the beginning and neither of us did it, so I'm glad that I've just remembered what the image is, because now as soon as I've finished with this video, that's the first thing I'm going to go and do, is go and find that reference, bring it up, get it ready, and make the final soft pastel piece to finish off the exhibition. The exhibition was called Movement in the Fields, and here we are, these 2 matching pieces together, and that's in 2 matching frames. Now I must admit the piece that I'm going to do, that I've just been mentioning, the last piece, is not going to be in a matching frame with these, but it's going to be in a different place than these 2 are anyway, so it doesn't need to match with these frames. It needs to match up with other frames in the exhibition, which it will do. So there we are, that is the piece done. Hope you enjoyed what's in the video. Thank you very much, and I will see you tomorrow.